This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to another edition of Behind the Headlines by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. My name is Jerry Strittmatter, a board member, and I'm filling in for Charlie again, who's on assignment. But with me is Maura Donnelly, who is really the best hostess ever. So Maura, how are you today?
Well, after that introduction, I can't be anything but fabulous. Thank you very much.
And our first guest today is Dave Sanko from the who really leads and takes care of all the township supervisors with the Pennsylvania Association of Township Supervisors. So welcome, Dave, and please let us know what's going on in your world with so many changes with the pandemic. I know that the federal government was putting all these edicts onto local governments. How are you faring?
Well, thanks for the opportunity to be here. Look, local governments are doing what local governments always do, and they're continuing to work and trying to get by and dealing with the mandates that are being confronted or they're being confronted by. I mean, it had a big impact on the pandemic. Had a big impact on local government. I mean, it changed initially. It changed the way that you had to operate. Local governments have to meet once or twice a month. All of a sudden, you weren't allowed to have public meetings. So you had to quickly figure out how you were going to continue to do the business of government and get those things done. So they went from to remote meetings or virtual meetings, depending on the area. But one of the things that the pandemic really pointed out is the vast shortage of broadband internet across Pennsylvania. And that some areas simply don't have that capacity or capability. Some communities easily switched to having video and meetings similar to this. Other communities didn't have that option. They struggled and may have had a Motorola flip phone sitting on a conference table on speaker mode. And that was the best technology option that they could be afforded. So we were grateful the legislature allowed there to be remote meetings, much as the legislature has been meeting remotely for local governments, and that made a big difference in terms of public access.
Dave, I know that last time we talked to you, you pretty much were back in the office and everybody was there and you were back pretty quickly, but how has the pandemic affected your organization as an organization?
Well, I think as a member service organization trying to help townships and township supervisors do their job better, ours is one of sharing information and getting training done and getting that information out about new rules and regulations and trying to unwind some of the confusing things that came out of state government early on. And the way we had to do that all of a sudden was very different. We too had to do a lot more electronically, but we were able to quickly shift. We had to cancel our conference, but we were able to quickly shift all of our programs and presentations to offer them in a virtual setting like this, where they were then available live, but also recorded so people could see those through the end of the year. And in reality, we also switched to some telephone town halls where we were able to bring people together and interact with each other and share best practices. And we were having, anywhere between 200 and 500 people on the lines during those presentations, and it was a real opportunity for us as an organization to show that we could adapt, but it was a bigger opportunity to show that the township governments they get the job done no matter what the challenges are, and they were able to make those adaptations as well and learn as we went along. I mean, early on, this was like flying an airplane while it was being built. A lot of unknown stuff, and I think Pennsylvanians fared well, and local government fared well in serving its residents.
Thank you so much for doing such a good job, because this is June and budget month, but in this last year, the local governments, with your lead, had to put up with a state government that was doing two different budgets, and so it seemed as if the federal and the state budget deadlines and preparation and hearings were all different. Did the local governments make out okay with this confusion, and are they set for this month?
Well, I think whenever budget season comes around in Harrisburg, it is often says, well, how will it be helpful for local governments? And we've found that the budget season is a time for sometimes a time for more mischief than good, and that while we want to look out for what happens for local government, it is oftentimes far more important to look out for what might happen to local government. And it's sometimes where the unfunded mandates come along in tucked into a fiscal code that nobody knew anything about, and all of a sudden it becomes law. This year, I think, will be a little different based on the amount of federal aid. I mean, we saw recently the state is actually enjoying a budget surplus. Revenues are up. Not to say they're not figuring out ways to spend it. And there is going to be additional federal aid that will be allocated. One of the big differences is that some of that money will go to local governments, but a lot of the focus in June is going to be probably on transportation funding. There's a commission that the governor's appointed, the Transportation Revenue Options Commission, on which I serve and represent local government, and that's a commission that is talking about needing more money. As is often the case in Harrisburg, everybody wants more money, and at PennDOT, which spends over $8 billion with a B, $8 billion annually for roads and bridges. There's a belief that they need an additional $8 billion, and they want to double their budget. Which would be nice if there was money to be found for how to do that. But interestingly, in all those discussions, the $8 billion new dollars, there's nothing set aside for local government or local roads. And in Pennsylvania, local governments provide 60 to 65% of all the local roads and bridges in the state. PennDOT does about 40,000 miles, and local government does 77,000 miles. So there's, you can't go anywhere without your first or last mile being on local government roads. So we think local transportation is something that needs to be addressed, and absent the legislature addressing it, or the failure of the legislature address, local governments only have one option, and that's to raise property taxes. So inaction on the part of Harrisburg will mean higher local property taxes in communities.
Dave, you mentioned federal revenue dollars. It seems like we can't really even have a guest on lately that isn't trying to get a piece of that pie for their organization or for their cause. But how will the local governments be direct recipients of any of the federal infrastructure dollars that are possibly coming?
Sure. It's I think everybody's trying to get a piece of the pie because it's a big pie. And there's lots of pieces to be had. I mean, Pennsylvania, they've taken the money and they've split it into 2 years, the 2021 and 2022 budgets. So Pennsylvania will get a total of over $7 billion just to the state government, almost $3 billion to county governments, almost $2.5 billion to cities. And large municipalities, and then the smaller municipalities in the state, which are under 50,000 in population, they will share about a little under half, about $491 million a year. So all those small communities will have direct funding for certain kinds of eligible categories. Not roads and bridges, incidentally, but they can use it for anything that was COVID related from the emergency. They can use it for premium pay for essential workers. They can use it to replace lost revenue that would have been lost as a result of the pandemic. And finally, they can use it for infrastructure investments for water, sewer, and broadband connectivity to help stem the digital divide.
Yeah,
Well, if you're a betting man, how likely do you think we'll see this federal aid coming down?
Well, I think Congress was very clear that particularly with the direct allocations, that the states will get a direct allocation from the federal government. The larger cities will get a direct allocation from the federal government. The counties will get a direct allocation from federal government. All of the local governments in Pennsylvania will be secondary recipients. That money has to funnel through the state government first. So the state government gets an additional almost $1 billion to share with locals. Congress was pretty clear that the states couldn't tinker around with that. They couldn't keep any of it for administrative costs. They couldn't put any strings on it other than what Congress put on the strings. And I identify what those categories are. So I think once the Commonwealth makes the request for the funding, and they have not yet done that, as of the beginning of the month. Once that request is made, they have 30 days to turn that money. It'll be instantaneously transferred from U.S. Treasury to the state accounts within 24 hours, and then they have 30 days to distribute that money to local governments. We've tried to help our folks understand that there's no race to spend this money. You don't get a prize or an award for spending it fastest, and you have until 2024 to obligate it, and until 2026 to actually spend it. And it's far better to do it right than it is to do it fast. So you want to make sure that it's for appropriate, legitimate categories.
and also so our viewers know, it should be one-time spending. We got into trouble with this with another funding from the federal government, and it ended up with education of people feeling that they were shortchanged, but they weren't. They didn't realize it was one-time spending in education. So I know that you and your members know, but for your viewers, in the last minute that we have, what would you suggest to our viewers to say to our local governments? What are some of those one-time things or those transfers that you want to take care of?
I think that our viewers should be talking to both Harrisburg officials and local government officials to stress that very point, that this money should not be used for operating expenses because it'll just leave a bigger hole when it's not there, and it's not going to be there forever. It should be for special categories, and adding water lines, adding sewer lines, adding broadband infrastructure, doing things, upgrading your buildings so that they're COVID safe or safer air quality in the future. Cybersecurity, I think, is a huge opportunity. Computer systems, things that you can invest in that are a one-time purchase that will last for a decade and protect residents for years.
Thank you so much for better informing all of our viewers and bringing us up to date. And we'll be right back with another segment of Behind the Headlines.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, the largest, most influential municipal association in the Commonwealth. Since 1921, PSATS has been preserving and strengthening township government and securing greater visibility and involvement for townships in the state and federal political arenas. Covering 95% of Pennsylvania's land mass, townships represent 5.5 million residents, more than any other type of political subdivision in Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Welcome back to this segment of Behind the Headlines. Maura and I are so happy to have Bob Latham, the expert with transportation needs in Pennsylvania, with us today. Bob is the Executive Vice President of the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors and is very knowledgeable, and we look forward to hearing more. Bob, welcome. The first question.
Jerry, Maura, nice to see you.
The first question I have for you is fill us in on, we want to get to your survey, but first, give us an overview of how you see, or so our viewers can, get the context of how you see highway funding and how it's been hurt over these many years by not really funding it properly, and that basically transferring funds out of what should be highway funds, into important things like the state police, but still they've been transferred out.
Jerry, thank you. Yes, over the years, we've had some challenges. Now let's go back to 2013 when the General Assembly, leadership in the General Assembly, bipartisan, I should say, passed a comprehensive transportation funding bill signed by then Governor Corbett. And we were able to do a number of things with that bill that are very positive. First of all, Pennsylvania at that time on its state system had about 6,000 what we call bad bridges. We fixed half of those. That inventory is down to now 3,000. Our local governments, which we have to realize have 70,000 miles of road. We talk about our state system a lot with 40,000 miles, but the local governments have 70,000. They got a much needed boost in funding. The problem is that when we passed Act 89, we immediately started shifting money from the transportation fund, known as the motor license fund, over to the general fund in order to pay for the budget of the state police, rather than having that important function be paid for by the general fund. And that has eaten away at our ability to further improve roads and bridges, further put people back to work, further make safety improvements to our highway system. That's impacted us tremendously. $700 million a year taken out of that transportation fund, which is 11 cents per gallon of your gas tax. We have the second highest gas tax in the country, and unfortunately about 20% of that isn't going to roads.
Well, I know that you've come up with a lot of different, I think solutions would be the right word for this issue of, the diversion of the funding. Do you want to tell us a little bit about, and we've talked about them before, but let's recap some of these issues.
Sure. So in the short term, well, we have a long term, we have a short term issue here. And let's talk about short term. So COVID, of course, impacted a number of people, and transportation and highway construction budget, no exception to that. So when people stopped driving there for a couple months in April and May of last year, 2020, we saw a drop in revenues because we have a consumption-based tax. In order to make up for that, the federal government came in and back and filled with a number of bills. We're all familiar with that. The most recent one that passed in March was known as the American Rescue Plan. It infuses the Commonwealth's general fund with about $7 billion, a little more than $7 billion over the next 2 years. Our plan would be to take some of that money and allow the money that motorists pay in gas taxes to stay in the motor license fund, stay in the transportation arena, use it to make safety improvements, fix roads and bridges, and then use that federal money, that American Rescue Plan money, to make sure that the state police are fully funded by funding them through the general fund. We believe that that can be done. It could have an immediate boost on our highway program. It would ensure that the state police are funded while we look at some options going forward into, for future long-term funding solutions.
Our viewers are certainly interested in the road system, and I know you have a survey that points that out. But the other thing, I think you'll agree with this, that the viewers need to do is contact their Congress people and their state legislators and state senators and the governor with the need to act, both federally and the state, because they're there. The legislators do a good job, Congressmen do a good job, but they need to hear from the viewers. Isn't that correct?
Yes. So we've heard a lot lately about a quote unquote federal infrastructure package. First started with President Biden introducing a concept with a very, very broad-based concept that I guess included a great expansion of infrastructure. Senate Republicans have come back with a more narrow focused plan. And now they're sort of into the machinations of, well, how do you pay for it? There's a tax policy involved. It's not just a user fee concept. So I guess this is a roundabout way, Jerry and Maura, of saying, I think it's going to be quite some time before we see said infrastructure package or transportation plan out of the federal government, out of Congress. On a parallel track in Washington, we're seeing a need to, what they say, reauthorize the federal highway program. That comes up in October. I think the two of these issues are going to meet somewhere in September. But the point is, it's going to be until next year or beyond when any of that money is seen here in Pennsylvania or can be put to use for the benefit of motorists in Pennsylvania. That's why this short-term plan of using the American Rescue Funds to pay for the state police and allowing more money to stay in the motor license fund on the short term, we'll see a boost while we see what happens at the federal level. You know, a lot of the pushback we get in some cases on this is, well, we have to wait and see what the feds do. Well, we've been waiting to see what the feds will do for a number of years. And
25 years or so.
Yeah, maybe 25 years, but who's counting? So you know, implementing this short-term plan could have a lot of benefits in terms of highway safety and benefits to motorists here in Pennsylvania, and move things forward while future plans get going. We also have some ideas that are being tossed about here in Pennsylvania. The governor has created the Transportation Revenue Options Commission. They're looking at a myriad of things to do there. Senator Wayne Langerhoek recently announced a plan he calls Drive Smart, which is a comprehensive look at everything from electric vehicles to autonomous vehicles to efficiencies within state government. All this will be in the mix, but once again, that's all in the mix for the future. And we're looking at something that we might be able to get done in the present that will be help our roads be safer and get people around more efficiently.
I think it's really important to note that you're not in any way suggesting that the state police be underfunded in any way, or that there be any safety issues involved with this, correct?
Well, that's correct. We have our plan fully funds the state police and actually allows the General Assembly to increase funding for their operations if they so choose. A lot of states, most states pay for either their highway patrol or their state police out of general funds. We're a little bit unique with our state police in that they are not, just the state highway patrol like a number of states are. They are full service law enforcement agency and perform tremendous functions for us. And again, what we're proposing here will make sure that they are fully funded while freeing up, a lot of money for road improvements at the same time.
And safety is the number one issue you were hitting on, and so it'll save the state police a lot of report writing, and also save the lives of our viewers as they're driving and have that patience with all the road work that you've been able to do on such a limited budget. The work zone safety, is something that you were pushing for many years, and how's that working?
Well, it's going very well. As a matter of fact, we're seeing less speeds through highway, or I should say slower speeds through highway work zones than we had in the past. Unfortunately, one of the real unfortunate byproducts of COVID was that while there were fewer cars on the road, it seemed like those people that were driving faster. And we actually saw an increase in accidents in 2020 than we had in previous years, even with a lower number of vehicles on the road. The one bright spot there is that people do slow down when they get to these automated speed enforcement work zones. We're seeing it here. We've experienced it in Maryland, where we kind of came up with the idea, and it really does work, and it saves lives, mostly with motorists. While we in the highway construction industry are very concerned about the safety of our workers and the inspectors from PennDOT and all the people who are out there on the project, it's actually most of the accidents or injuries are the motorists themselves. So it really is having a good impact on people driving and their safety as they go through highway work zones.
So you know how John Q. Public is. The minute these funds hit, they're going to want to know, when is my bridge going to be fixed? When is my road going to be fixed? How quickly can PennDOT get going on projects that, might not be the top priority, but may get some funding with the new federal funds?
Well, the good news about what we're promoting here, which is the use of federal highway, or use of the federal rescue plans in order to kind of free up PennDOT monies. The good news is that all of the regional offices, I guess if you will, we call them PennDOT districts, who manage these projects, they all have construction projects that are already under design. They have permits, they're ready to go. So we can push this work out very quickly. And I think it'll be statewide. You know, it's not like something's going to be only in Western Pennsylvania or only in Eastern Pennsylvania. All the districts across the state have projects ready to go, and we can move things forward very rapidly.
Thank you very much. In the last few seconds that we have, are there any other items that you'd like to hit?
Well, again, Jerry and Maura, thank you for having me on here. I think the idea here is that we have a short-term need, and we have an opportunity with the American Rescue Funds to boost highway safety and highway safety projects, fix bridges, while we ferret out, what's the long-term future for funding of transportation in Pennsylvania.
Well, thank you very much for bringing everybody up to date. It's very informative. And we'll look forward to seeing all of you in our next edition of Behind the Headlines.